Hey besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today marks the first day of me posting my end of the year videos. These are my favorite videos to film. I love sharing my favorites, my least favorites, just all the little things that add up to the reading of this past year. This video is going to be a little bit different because I've decided to do a separate video for my favorite romances of the year. Romance is definitely one of my top most read genres, but unfortunately that does not always equal my favorite books. I read a lot in quantity, but not so much in quality when it comes to romance. But this year I did read quite a few romances that I liked, but they didn't really make the cut for like being favorite books to put in my favorites video, so therefore I decided to do a separate video. I feel like I over-explained this. The concept is pretty straightforward, but I'm just rambling about it. I did not put this list in any sort of ranking. I'm literally just sharing with you the 8 books that I liked that happened to be romance, so we're just gonna get into this. I feel like I way over-explained this and it's really not that hard. It's not rocket science and I don't know why I'm treating it like it is. So the first romance on this list is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. This is technically labeled as a dark romance because it deals with some pretty dark topics. There's definitely some trigger warnings, so I definitely would caution you going into this if things like sexual assault or violence or kidnapping would affect you. This book follows our two main characters, Dean and Cora. They are soon to be brother and sister-in-law. Dean has been dating her sister Mandy since they were in high school, so they've known each other for like 15 years and they've never really liked each other. So at the start of the book, we have Cora. She's at a bar, she's having a good time, and then her wallet gets stolen and she can't find her way home, so she's calling everyone in her phone list and no one is picking up because it's like 2 a.m. and Dean is the only one who answers the phone. So while she's waiting for him to come pick her up, he begrudgingly says, "Yeah, I'll come get you." She is hanging out in the parking lot waiting for him, and there is this creepy ass man just standing there like kind of like being a creeper. And eventually Dean shows up and they bicker a little bit and the guy overhears them talking and he's like, "Hey, are you guys dating?" And they're like, "No, we actually hate each other, thank you." And they actually end up getting kidnapped by this man because he is a serial killer called the Matchmaker, and his whole MO is that he kidnaps people who are not already couples and forces them to fall in love, and then he kills them, and it's like a whole thing that he does. And so now Cora and Dean are being held captive in this man's basement, and so the rest of the story is them just going through this harrowing experience together. They do eventually get out, and a lot of the book is actually about their healing, and it is an incredibly dark book. Like I said, it is labeled as dark romance. It has a lot to do with trauma, and there is quite a lot of sexual assault in it, especially at the beginning when they are kidnapped. And it is just a really heartwarming book for it being about such a dark topic. I really enjoyed Cora and Dean's journey together, and it's a little bit taboo of them being in love because he's meant to be engaged to her sister, and there's just a lot that happens. There's a lot to unpack there, and I just love how Jennifer Hartman handled the different character development. I love that Cora eventually went to therapy. There's a lot in there, and I just really enjoyed this book. If it sounds like something that you could be into without being triggered, I definitely would recommend it. The next romance on my list is one that I really enjoyed. There was something about it that just made me not want to put on my favorites of the year, but I still loved it a lot, so that's why I wanted to talk about it, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Every other year that Emily Henry has published a book, it has ended up on my like all-time favorites. Like People We Meet on Vacation and Beach Read are just like flawless to me. This is probably my least favorite out of the 3 that she's written, and so it just, there was something about it that just like wasn't giving like favorites of the year, but it definitely was giving like one of the top romances because Emily Henry is the blueprint for writing romance. Like, I love her, I worship her. Emily Henry knows how to write it. I cannot wait for Happy Place, which comes out in April. So this book follows Nora. She is a literary agent and she is referred to as a shark. She's really good at her job. She's a career woman, and she has this long bad history of men breaking up with her because she takes her career too seriously. There's a little bit of poking fun at like Hallmark tradition where these men that she's dating will go off to a small town for business and they'll fall in love with a very quaint girl there, and then they'll break up with her because she's like the mean city bitch. So at the start of this book, Nora and her sister decide to take a vacation. Nora is not usually one to let loose and do this sort of thing, but Libby really wants them to go on a trip to kind of rekindle their sister friendship. And so while she's in this small town, she actually runs across this guy Charlie, who she knows from New York City. They actually both work in publishing, and they actually typically do not get along, but while they're both stuck in this small town, they start to fall in love. I actually feel like the banter in this book was the best banter that Emily Henry has written to date. It was just like so good, chef's kiss, like amazing. I loved that Nora never had to change who she was as a person. I loved that all the conflict in this was very mature. It was very adult. There was no miscommunication trope, and I loved Charlie. I found Charlie to be so sexy, such a good male love interest. I think maybe what dragged this book down a little bit for me was the character of Libby. I did not really care about her plotline with Nora. Like, I did enjoy that there was a side plot of her trying to figure out what was going on with her sister, but in general I think I cared more about the romance than I did with that. And so there were just little things that made me not want to make this a favorite of the year, but it still was really good. Like I said, Emily Henry is just that girl. Like, she knows How to Write a Romance. Like, I can't even believe she does what she does. It's like so good. So definitely recommend this. I know that I keep like saying there were little things about it that I didn't like, but it still was really good. I think I just hold Emily Henry to a really high standard because I loved Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation so much. So we'll see what book 4 brings us, but I definitely really like this and I would really recommend it. I know there's a lot of mixed reviews on this. I've seen this showing up on a lot of people's favorites and least favorites of the year. Like, a lot of people are saying this is one of the worst books they read this year. I feel like if you temper your expectations going into this, knowing that the romance is very present, but there is a lot to do with her relationship with her sister, then maybe you won't be disappointed that the romance isn't like always like front and center. But other than that, still really good. I loved it. I thought it was good. The next book on my list is technically a cozy fantasy, but I feel like the romance is a huge part of the plot, so I'm just gonna count it as romance because I want to talk about it this year. And that is Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. I am very quickly falling in love with T. Kingfisher's writing. This is the second book by her that I have read, and I liked it so much. This is about a woman named Hella who works as a housekeeper for her great uncle, and at the very start of the book he dies and he leaves his whole inheritance to Hella, and the family is not a huge fan of that. They're kind of upset that he did that, and so they're trying to force Hella to marry her cousin, but she does not want to marry her cousin because he's kind of gross and he's got clammy hands and he's just not a good time. So the family ends up locking Hella in her bedroom and they tell her that she can't leave until she agrees to marry her cousin, and she would much rather die than do this. So she decides that she wants to kill herself. So she finds a sword hanging on her wall and she strips all of her clothes off. It's a very funny scene, and she's just completely naked and she tries to take the sword down and she's trying to figure out how to fall on the sword, and she takes it out of its sheath, and right when she does that, this man named Sarkis pops out of the sword, and he is now her protector because the sword belongs to her now that she inherited all of her uncle's belongings. And he sees her naked and he's like, oh my god, what's going on? And he explains to her that he like lives inside the sword, and it's this whole magical thing. So Sarkis helps Hella escape and they take off on a journey. So a lot of this book is them running away from her family, trying to figure out what their next move is going to be, and obviously as they are going on this trip they start to fall in love, and it's very sweet. I love the cozy fantasy vibes. If you are loving cozy fantasy this year, if that is a genre that you've been getting into like I have, I think that you would really enjoy this. It just has really great vibes. I'm personally not a huge like road trip journey person, so that kind of kept me from giving this book 5 stars, but it still was really enjoyable, and despite not really liking that setting for plots, I still really enjoyed this. And I just love T. Kingfisher's writing because she has this level of humor in everything that she writes, and it was just really good. It was really sweet and I would really recommend it. The next book on my list is actually another book by Jennifer Hartman. I don't really know why I didn't talk about them one after the other, but that is Lotus. This is not necessarily a dark romance, but it still deals with fairly heavy topics. So in this book we have our main character Oliver, and when he was 6 years old he was actually kidnapped, and it's been about 20 years, I think 25 years, I can't fully remember how old he is now, but he is suddenly released from captivity. And when he was kidnapped it kind of rocked everyone's world. His family, his friends, like everyone was like so shocked that he was kidnapped and they could not find him. And so now he suddenly has shown up back in his life and everybody's like, oh my god, Oliver is back. And now he sort of has to piece his life back together, and the girl next door who he was always best friends with when he was a kid still lives there, and so they sort of rekindle their friendship. I don't remember what her name is. She is an important character because she's the other main character, but I literally don't remember her name. But basically it's all about her and Oliver falling in love, and Oliver just sort of trying to figure out like, why was he kidnapped? What's the mystery behind this? And there were just so many sweet moments in this because Oliver is such a darling angel baby. Everything about Oliver is so sweet. He only has eyes for the main girl, and even when she's sort of slow to agreeing to like be in a relationship with him, he is just so like earnest and honest about everything he intends and wants from her. And so there's a little bit of the trope of like him not necessarily like knowing a lot sexually and her teaching him, which is like, the spice was pretty good. And then like I said, there is still a mystery of like trying to figure out why Oliver was kidnapped. And so it was really good. It was really good. It was really sweet and we love to see it. Oliver is the best. Next up we have a very random book. I heard someone talking about it on TikTok and I just sort of like favorited it on Scribd, and then one day I just was like, I'm gonna read this. And it is actually a sports romance called The Penalty Box by Odette Stone. And let me just say before I even tell you the plot, this has one of my least favorite tropes of all time. Like, I would have rated this 5 stars and put this in my favorites list if it hadn't had this one trope. I can't really say what it is because then it will spoil it for you, but if you know anything about me, then you might be able to guess what this trope is. I don't know if I've ever really like talked about it on my channel, but I hate this thing. I feel like a lot of people hate this thing, so you might be able to guess because I keep, you know, hinting at what it is. But regardless, I still really liked the book, so I want to talk about it because I still feel like it's worth reading because there's so much good about it. Like, I still gave it 4 stars, but that one thing at the end, just the worst. But still good, still good. I feel like I am doing this book a disservice by talking about the bad before I talk about the good, whatever. So we have two main characters, obviously. There's always two main characters in a romance. I don't know why I felt the need to say that. But the guy is a Russian hockey player, and she, I believe, is like the assistant of his sports agent. I can't fully remember what her job is, but she is related to him in some sort of PR way. At the start of the book, this Russian hockey player is hanging out with one of his childhood friends who is also Russian, but he is sort of like tied up in like the Russian mob. And so his warehouse that they're in ends up getting raided, and so then he gets connected to this. And so his image is like looking really bad, and so they are on the verge of like the hockey team cutting him because of all of the bad just like PR around him. So his agent comes up with this plan to make him do a fake marriage that will allow his image to look better. And so they decide that the perfect person for this will be the girl that is the agent, because then they can have a cover story for how they were like lying about their relationship for a long time because they were like involved with work, and so then they can just like suddenly get married and it won't look sketchy. I don't know, it doesn't really make sense when you like lay it all out, but it was cute. I suspended belief for it. But what I loved about this book is, number one, fake marriage. I love a fake marriage. I love a fake dating. I love fake relationship. Like, we love to see it. I love fake dating. I love fake married. I love it. Number two, we had the trope of them not really like liking each other in the beginning. Like, the girl definitely likes him because she thinks he's really hot, and she's like always thought he was hot because, you know, she's always been like seeing him with her boss because she's the assistant to the sports agent. But she thinks he's kind of a jerk, and so there's a little bit of like he's an asshole and she doesn't really actually like him. But then like there's a lot of chemistry between them, and then there's like this scene when he first starts to like really take notice of her. It's because one day she's like trying on lingerie in her bedroom and he like walks in on her, and I know that kind of sounds like it would be a spoiler, but it's really not. And it's just like, it's just one of those scenes where it's just like, we love to see it. Like, it's giving like Wattpad vibes, but in a good way. We love it. And so I just loved the writing in this. I definitely would like to read more from Odette Stone, and I did not know that I liked sports romance, but this is one of the few sports romances I read this year that I kind of was like, I think I might like sports romance, which is a little weird because I don't normally like sports. As long as there's not too much sports in it. I like when the guy is like a sports ball player, but not actually like a lot of on-page sports, you know. And I also kind of like hockey. Like, that is the one sport that I actually will watch, that and like soccer. So yeah, I don't know, I'm rambling right now. There's also a little bit of a suspenseful side plot where the girl is getting a little bit stalked. Like, she's like getting weird presents on their doorstep. She's getting weird messages, like weird stuff is going on like every time he goes away for an away game. And then the Russian hockey player also has sort of like a tragic backstory that you slowly learn throughout the book. I don't know, it's kind of a cheesy book, but I still really liked it. There was just one thing at the end that I hated. I hate it. But at the same time, if I was going to be okay with this trope, I feel like this book had good reasons for doing it. So I came around to the idea, even though I don't typically like it, but I came around. I came around and it made sense, and I still wanted them to be together, and I still liked the writing. So it was a 4-star read, and I really recommend it. I feel like I did a bad job advertising it, but just know that it has a lot going for it. It's got the sports. It's got the fake marriage. It's got a lot of hot and steaminess, and it's also got a little bit of a thriller aspect of like, there's the Russian mob, and then there's like the stalker thing, and it's just like, it's fun. It's fun. It's a good time. The next romance on my list is The Surviving Trace by Kalia Reed. This is a time travel romance book about this woman who comes across this photo. She works at an antique shop. She actually owns the antique shop, and she is like unpackaging these like antique photos, and in the photo she sees a man that showed up very vividly in one of her dreams, and she feels like she has a connection to him and she can't stop thinking about it. And so one day she like goes to sleep in her living room, and then she actually wakes up in, I believe, in the 1920s, 1940s. Do not quote me on what year it was. I feel like it was like, maybe it was the 30s. I don't know. She wakes up somewhere between the 20s to 40s, and she is in Charleston, and she has no idea how she got there, and she is actually in the body of this woman who's married to this guy named, you know what, I don't remember anyone's names. You really cannot ask me to name many characters. It's very rare that I remember characters' names. But anyway, she wakes up in the potentially 1920s to 1940s. No, oh my god, it was like 1912 because the Titanic happened. When did Titanic happen? Anyway, so disregard what I said about the 20s to 40s. I believe it's like the 1910s. And so anyway, she wakes up in Charleston. She is married to this man, and he is convinced that she is his wife, and she kind of sees photos and she realizes she looks exactly like this woman, and so she's like in her body, and she and the guy like slowly fall in love. She tries to convince him that she's like a time traveler, and it's just like this really like angsty epic love story between the two of them. And she actually has a fiance in present day, so it reminded me a lot of Outlander. I feel like if you liked Outlander, you would really enjoy this book. And I just love that there was a lot of like intrigue around the time travel. The book actually ended on a pretty good cliffhanger, so I am looking forward to reading the next book in the series. I believe it's like a 3-book trilogy, but it's all about time travel, and so I'm very intrigued to see where it goes. Like I said, it's giving me a lot of Outlander vibes, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it. It was a little bit angsty, but I kind of was into it. The next book on my list is honestly one of the cutest romances I read all year. Like, I loved it so much, and that is the Bromance book club by Lyssa Kay Adams. I literally bought a copy of it. I liked it so much. This whole series is about a group of guys who have a book club where they read romance books to try to improve their relationships. And in this first book, we have our main character Gavin, and his marriage is on the rocks. His wife Thea has just asked him for a divorce. So he gets inducted into the Bromance book club, and they give him this Regency book to read. And they basically tell him, try to get some life lessons out of this book, because the book is actually about a marriage on the rocks trope. And so it's all about him trying to get Thea back. And Gavin is actually a professional baseball player. So like I said, I've just been enjoying sports romances. There's two kind of sports romances on this list. I absolutely loved that in between Gavin and Thea's chapters, there were excerpts of the Regency romance that he's reading. So it was just a really funny book to read. I actually giggled multiple times listening to this. All the guys in the book club are so funny, and I actually love that it's a companion book series because each guy gets his own book, and the sequel, Undercover Romance, is actually very good as well. I just don't have a copy of it. That is about another guy in the group who actually starts to date Thea's sister. But it was so good. It was so cute. We love it so much. I love the series. It is so adorable, and I really would highly recommend it. And the final and last book on my list is one that I feel like everyone has been talking about. It is definitely getting a lot of hype. I will say I am posting this after Christmas, so it's not very topical for you to read it now unless you don't mind reading about Christmas after Christmas. But what I am trying to reference is Lovelight Farms by B.K. Borison. So in this book, we have our girl Stella. She owns a Christmas tree farm, but we quickly find out that the farm is not doing very well financially. So she decides to apply to this contest that a social media influencer is holding that essentially will have the social media person like coming to the farm and doing a lot of PR for it. And then eventually, if she wins the contest, she'll get some money. And so she just thinks it'll be good advertisement to the farm and help them out financially. The only problem is that when she applied to the contest, she wrote down this whole origin story of the farm, saying that she purchased this Christmas tree farm with her boyfriend and it's super romantic. But there is an issue because she does not have a boyfriend. So she unfortunately has to do some fake dating with her best friend Luca to try to convince this influencer that they are madly in love. And they have been friends for like over a decade, and they've always had a will they won't they thing going on. They've always kind of had a crush on each other, but just like sort of kept each other at an arm's length. And so this is a small town romance because Stella lives in a tiny town in Maryland, and there's definitely like Gilmore Girl vibes in this. I loved how interesting all the townsfolk were. It was so funny. I loved it so much. It was just definitely giving me like Stars Hollow vibes. And then the romance between Luca and Stella was just like so adorable. We loved to see it, and it was just like good. The smut was good. Like, it wasn't like cringy. It was like kind of sexy, and I loved the connection that Luca and Stella had. Like, you could definitely feel that they had this like long-standing friendship and all these built up emotions towards one another, and it was just like good. And I really liked the writing. Like, I feel like B.K. Borison did a really great job. Unfortunately, I am bringing this book up after Christmas, but if you can stomach reading a Christmas book in like January or February, then you should still do it because it's so cute. And this is a companion book series. There's actually 2 more books in the series. I'm currently reading the sequel. I will say I do not love the sequel quite as much as Lovelight Farms, but it's still good. It's still good because we get to see all the characters from the first book, and I'm just loving the small town vibes. But that brings us to the end of this list of my favorite romances of 2022. I loved so many of these on the list. They were so much fun. I really hope that you enjoyed this list and that maybe you could find a book that you'd want to read. Let me know down below what your favorite romances were of 2022. Maybe I could pick them up. Maybe we could even do a vlog where I read your favorite romances. If you enjoyed this video and this list, feel free to leave any form of the heart emoji in your comment down below so that I know you made it to the end. And I thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.